Yeah, if I the what I see from that verse is that you can be a pimp.
Yeah, exactly. So Allah, that's funny. What the verse is saying, do not force your slave women into prostitution so that you might gain something out of it, some worldly gain. But if you do so, if you force them, then after that, Allah is forgiving, most merciful. I would ask you, brother Habib, if you're interested in answering, why would God be forgiving to those people? Why would God be forgiving right now in this particular scenario? Like the guy is forcing the girl to do fornication, to prostitute herself for
Right.
money, basically, like a pimp brother has said. So, what's your thoughts on this? Why is it
Yeah,
permissible? Why is it even forgiven?
yeah.
Prostitution.
2433. It's
Okay.
2433. So it says, let those who find not the wherewithal for marriage keep themselves chaste until Allah gives them means out of His grace. Okay, I'm just going to jump to the main point of the verse, what we're referring to. But force not your maids to prostitution when they desire chastity. So it says fetayatikum, for maids here. It would mean slave women, even though technically you could read fetayatikum to mean girls in general. But I'm sure from the context we'll all agree that it's referring to slave women and not daughters, right? I'm hoping. Wallahu alam. But force not your maids to prostitution when they desire chastity, in order that ye may make a gain in the goods of this life. But if anyone compels them yet, after such compulsion, is Allah oft forgiving, most merciful. Okay, so basically it's saying that don't force your girls, meaning slave girls. I mean, that's the apparent meaning of the verse. We can disagree if you guys would like to disagree. But yeah, it says don't force your girls into prostitution in order to gain something from this world. And if one forces them after that, then Allah is forgiving. So that's the verse. Abdul Bar, would you like to share your thoughts on on the verse itself?
Yes, so from that verse, the apparent meaning of the verse that you read, brother Khalil, is hold on.
Yeah, if I the what I see from that verse is that you can be a pimp.
Exactly. So Allah, that's funny. What the verse is saying, do not force your slave women into prostitution so that you might gain something out of it, some worldly gain. But if you do so, if you force them, then after that, Allah is forgiving, most merciful. I would ask you, brother Habib, if you're interested in answering, why would God be forgiving to those people? Why would God be forgiving right now in this particular scenario? Like the guy is forcing the girl to do fornication, to prostitute herself for
Right.
money, basically, like a pimp brother has said. So, what's your thoughts on this? Why is it
Yeah,
permissible? Why is it even forgiven?
yeah. I would have to look at the jessive mood, where it would seem that this should be, if you did, like in regards to, not if you will or in the future, this is something you're going to continue to do, but if you did, uh, then Allah is forgiving. This is something, I don't think this is like speaking of like an ongoing thing, like Allah got you, don't worry.
What was that? Allah got you?
What's this? What's the sir and I at again, please?
This is
Sorry, do you have the surah?
2433.
Yep.
It doesn't seem to be speaking about past tense.
well, it says there's a jessive, a mood, gives you
What's this? Can you tell us what this means in Arabic? Just as
right. Give me a sec. Brother, I'm just a student, so I'm not on the level of you guys. But there are things that I do notice. And in that specific verse, it's saying it is a adjective mood. Then this also allows it to say did, do, have not, did not, or do not, have not, or did not. So this is basically in these examples, it could say do, have, or did. So this could be if you did opposed to if you do.
May I come in 1 second?
Yeah.
Go ahead, bro. Go
Am I
ahead.
the only one? Okay, go ahead.
And again, just again reading on where it goes and to dig into it. But when I've read this a number of times, and you look into it, and again, I'll have to get into the Arabic, and so don't go jumping on me. I don't want wolf pack back. We've had a good day today, so let's not bring out a wolf pack. But when I read this, and I try and read it over and over, isn't it that if you're compelled to do it, isn't it talking about the person to whom is being prostituted? That if she is forced or compelled to do so, not so much as Ak would call it, the pimp. We're talking about the one who desires chastity. That if you're compelled to do so, Allah will forgive her for such actions. Not so much, doesn't really even talk about the one using the one for prostitution. If I read that over and over and what I'm getting for it, I could be off, but is it talking about the one who's being prostituted, not the one who's prostituting her?
I mean, like, for example, in certain parts of Nigeria, marrying off your daughter is an essential part of surviving life, right? So sometimes you might basically prostitute your daughter so your family can survive, right? And it's about and what I can read from this verse, what is denoted here from the Arabic is basically that if that happens, then there is forgiveness, and I find that beautiful.
Okay. Abdul Bar, would you like to share your thoughts on your understanding of the verse?
On my real understanding of the verse, or the apparent meaning that you could get from the verse if you're a
Your real
Quranic?
understanding before this room gets closed and we all get reported.
You don't want anybody thinking that pimps are allowed in Islam. Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So the verse is speaking. It's actually explained through the sayings of the Sahaba, like Ibn Abbas, but it's also explained through another harf of the Quran that was recited during the time of the Prophet, peace be upon him. وَمَن يُكْرِهُنَّ فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ مِن بَعْدِ إِكْرَاهِهِنَّ لَهُنَّ غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ. So whoever, and if you do force them into prostitution, then Allah, after their enforcing to them, meaning to the women, is forgiving and most merciful. Not to the person who is doing the forcing, not to
That's,
the guy who is forcing his
that's
maids.
what I that's what I was saying, right? Is that what I was getting from that?
Yes, that's correct, but that's taken from the Sunnah.
Right, but I just
In
took
the
that from the
scenario,
words, is what I was saying. I didn't know
No,
there was a head about that. So,
yeah,
subhanAllah.
but you cannot force
just
me to understand that. I mean, if a guy right now has maids or daughters and he wants to force them to for prostitution for money, he would point to that verse and say, Allah is forgiving,
Right,
most merciful. Why would I take it?
and I would point them to other parts in the Quran that when you read that, it's like, come on, brother, they're not talking about the one who's doing the making her be a prostitute. They're talking about the one who is being prostituted. That if she's forced
yeah,
to do so, then Allah is forgiving, right? I mean,
fair
we could
enough,
ponder,
Jason.
reflect, and stay on that, right?
Fair enough, but I just told you like the sentiment of this North Nigerian father. And now, if he was a Quran only, just as you, there would be absolutely nothing wrong with him understanding that verse that way. There would be nothing. The Arabic
Allah,
wouldn't denote anything else.
and that goes to the very beginning of this room when I said Allah is the one to guide. If Allah wants to guide, and someone wants to come with some stuff like that already with preconceived stuff in their head, then Allah will guide them So whatever he wants to see, just like we can read an ayat, and you guys are sent to hadith and outside the
So,
books, and we stay in the
brother,
book to that, right? It's kind of the same thing.
But
but if
then
somebody came up with that interpretation, would you think that's guidance from God? I don't really get it, because
I
if a guy
but
understands from
Allah
a
knows.
verse
That's
that,
right. My
let me
point was
finish.
Allah knows best, right?
but real quick, then we came to that thing that
No,
you
no, go
have
ahead
no
and finish.
criteria. Jason, then we came to the conclusion that you have no criteria whatsoever to determine whose interpretation is the correct one. You have no criteria, so it's subjective. Because you can't. How are you gonna prove that this guy is guided by Allah and that guy is guided by Allah? How are you gonna prove it? You got any falsification?
Yeah,
Right.
that's the thing.
Then go back to 733 immoralities, right? What is sin? Immoralities. You think it's moral and it's not an immorality to be
yeah, but Jason,
someone
this is
else?
the
I
thing.
mean,
Like, what I described to you is a situation that's reality in a part of North Nigeria, right? So this is their culture. So just because you are fortunate enough or unfortunate enough from their perspective to be part of a culture which would never infer such a meaning, which would always go to, oh, the person's being forced. That's not universal. That's just basically, if what it actually is a form of cultural supremacism actually, because you're basically saying, hey, their culture is wrong, right? But they're reading the same Quran as you. So who's right at the end of the day?
He will find out on Judgment Day. That's what he said before. But in this world, he has
subhanAllah,
no
run to that which is good, and Allah will bring you all together, inshallah. I know it's cultural. You're bringing cultural, and then you're bringing Quran. If you bring this Quran into that culture and they read it,
What was the culture? What was the cultural act that he was speaking of?
he's talking about in Nigeria. There's places where they do prostitute out their daughters, or had to relate it to
A'udhu
marriage.
billah.
Wherever he was going with that, I don't know. So
Yeah,
if they read
there's a
this and they're Quran only, then they're gonna say, "Hey, see, read here. I can do that, and I'm forgiven." But that, to me, that's not what it says.
yeah. So just simply reading the Quran in context of the Quran, it doesn't allow these type of behaviors. It doesn't allow it. You can't
Yeah,
have
but
sex.
this
So it's a
verse,
forbidden.
the verse doesn't allow it either. It's just speaking about how if after this wrong is committed, there is forgiveness, right? And I don't see why you disagree with this. I mean, this is what the verse is saying in
But
Arabic.
Brother,
forgiveness
there's other
to the one
verses.
who's
This is,
prostituted, not the one who's doing the
No, I
handing
mean,
out.
that's not what the Arabic is. I mean, you know,
but
if
there's
you
other
didn't have
ayats that are clear.
with Akhi Abdul Bar, what he just gave you was a qat'i dalil that it is this way, right? So this is he basically gave you Quran as a qat'i dalil, a Qur'an which you don't accept, but he nevertheless gave it to you. Um,
Well,
whereas
which was
if I
great.
was
I
this,
accepted because I said it
if I
before he
was
gave it to me, right?
if
And I
I
didn't even
was
know about it.
if I was this North Nigerian guy, yes, and I had this Quran only manhaj, yes, there would be absolutely nothing wrong with me. I mean, I'm not saying it's halal, I'm saying it's haram, but there's forgiveness for me if I do it.
Okay, so let me tell you this. My dad was a pimp, so I got it from him. If my dad was a pimp, and I was growing up knowing that pimping was okay, right? And then it was there, but yet it's reached me, and I read this book, and I see that I don't see that as forgiveness for my father. Come on. So whether
Yeah,
you're
but
Nigeria
it's
or
talking about
American, I don't.
Jason,
You're using these what
the
if
ana-
games. Now these what if in scenarios that we go with, like, wife sending someone to the store and then reiterates and doesn't say two things, and then a Nigerian president.
Wallahi, Jason,
Scenarios
it's
that
not
are.
about what if. It's just about that this is these people exist. This culture exists.
I
If
believe
we go
that if
there and
you
if
go
we
to
preach the
Nigeria,
doctrine, if we
Folks,
preach the
folks, excuse me, guys, excuse me. It was a pleasure having you guys all here. I'm going to have to shut the room down.
yeah, if I the what I see from that verse is that you can be a pimp.
Exactly.